Are we on? Yeah, we are on. Good morning. I'm Al Verskier. I'm not one of the coordinators for Ccli. But our speaker today, Kristen, is a mystery person, and none of us knew her, but I knew her a little bit. So I'm up here and do the introduction. Before I do a little bio on Kristen and introduce her, let's begin with just a word of prayer. Loving God, thank you for your presence here today. Thank you for your church. Thank you for this church, its goals, its mission, the opportunities that we have to afford us to speak about things of importance. Lord God, bless Kristen's words this morning so they impact us in a way that we all do a better job in advancing your kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen. Kristen Slater is our speaker. Kristen gave me a bio. She was born in Holland, lived here most of her life until just a few years ago when the cost of housing forced her and her family to move away. They purchased a house in southern Allegan County. Kristen has worked in various places in Holland, including gas stations, family fare, check and go, taught for a while as a substitute teacher in the Holland Public Schools, also West Ottawa and Black River. She is married, has 2 kids, both of whom were born at Holland Hospital. She's currently a community columnist for the Holland Sentinel. Her husband works at a factory in Holland. Her column focuses on the life of people who are in the category that we call Alice. She will talk more about it, and the challenges presented to that population by the rising cost of housing in the Holland area. Also, Kristen won first place for Best Community Column in Division I from the Associated Press Media Editors of Michigan. She doesn't include in her an educational resume in her bio, but having done a little writing with Kristen lately, I can attest to the quality of her educational credentials. She's a really good writer, and some of you have read her columns. So please welcome Kristen Slater.
Thank you. Yeah, I went to Grand Valley and I majored in English. Employed and poor. So ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. It means you're going to work full time. Many people that I know who are in this group work more than full time. They're working Saturdays, they're doing overtime whenever they can. My husband and I have a friend who works at a factory, 3rd shift, and then goes to work at Walmart as well. And he works there part-time. So he's going from job to job, and he's actually stopped by our house, talked to our kids, and told me, well, I haven't slept since the day before yesterday. I really need to get home and sleep before my next shift at Walmart, which is, normal for people who are living in this group. My story, I graduated from Holland High School in '97. I attended Grand Valley State University, and I earned a bachelor's degree in English with secondary teaching emphasis in 2003. So I got certified to be an English teacher. I got married in 2007. We have 2 kids, and you can see my 2 kids. This is an old picture because my daughter is 12 now. She's going to be 13 in September. And she told me that if I used anything recent where people would know it was her when she was walking on the street, she would just die. So I had to use a really old picture. My son, who's the little guy in yellow, is now 6 years old, and he loves to pull her hair and, run things over and throw things, and, a 6-year-old boy. We are both employed. My husband works at a factory here in Holland. He has been with his current employer for 5 years. I work part-time. I never say where either of us works because in my columns, I never give names. So you never know where we work or what we do, or even when I'm telling a story, if it's even my story or somebody else's story. I work usually about 15 to 20 hours a week, and I've been working for about 2 to 3 years with my current employer. We live in southern Allegan County in something called Cheshire Township. Does anyone know where that is? Oh, you do. We live near the Swan Lake area. This little store by our house is called the Swan Lake store, and that's about 5 minutes from our house. So that gives you an idea of how far out we are. And my husband drives back and forth every day to get to his job. Our last year, our income was less than $35,000. And that is what our family of four lives on. 2007, I lived on a house on 15th Street here in Holland. It was right on the corner of 15th and Van Rolte, and it was my grandmother's house until she died. 2008, my father died. My parents owned the house that I lived in because we were still low income. We couldn't afford to buy a house in Holland. So we had just been living there, giving my parents rent, paying bills, things like that. So I moved in with my mom. In retrospect, I'm glad I did it because she would have been alone. So this was supposed to be a temporary situation. 2009, it's been about a year. Mom's doing well. Things are back to normal for her, as normal as they're going to get, new normal. So we went looking for housing. My husband was working at a factory. I worked part-time as a substitute teacher at the time. But we were denied an apartment at a local complex because we were low income. We just could not afford to rent this apartment. And here are rental prices in Holland. These are current. I actually looked them up within the last 2 or 3 days. Holland Apartments on 30th Street, you can get a 2-bedroom, but not until August 1st, for $1,025 a month. But that includes your heat, water, trash, and sewer, and a carport. So I thought that was actually a really good deal, considering the prices. You have to pay the electric, and to be able to live there and have it affordable, you have to have a yearly income of $41,000. Fieldstone Court, you can get 2 bedrooms, $925 a month. That doesn't include anything, except you do have a washer and dryer in the apartment and air conditioning. It's $37,000 a year for income to be able to afford to live there. Springbrook on 32nd Street, a 1-bedroom is $1,138 a month. A 2-bedroom, $1,372. And again, you have to make $45,000 to $54,000 a year to live there. And then 739 Lincoln, which is next to the Dollar General, on the corner of Lincoln and 32nd Street. They're the kind of cruddy apartments where you see people's blankets and stuff hanging outside as if they don't have dryers. I'm not really sure. That one was really surprising, $875 a month to live there. And they're really not nice apartments. My husband actually had a friend who lived there, and they're kind of very small. And you have to make $35,000 a year to be able to afford that. The S family. These are friends of ours. And this is doubling and tripling up. When I was living with my mom, she and I were doubling up. It's when you stick more than one family into one household. The S family are friends of ours who are also doubling and tripling up. And I kind of put this together. I didn't use any of their real pictures. The only pictures you see here who are the actual people are my own family. The S family lived with their grandparents, their uncle and his wife and their little daughter. And the S family were a mom and a dad and 2 kids, and they all shared one room in the basement. The uncle, his wife, and the daughter had another room upstairs, and the grandparents had another room upstairs. There were 2 bedrooms. And then they had a dog. And they all lived together in this little 2-bedroom ranch-style house. And they did what they could because that was what they could afford. All of the adults in the household were working except for the grandparents who were retired. And all together, they were able to help pay the bills, to be able to afford to live, and none of the younger adults could afford their own apartment because the rental prices were just too high. So you end up with people who are crammed into less than fantastic conditions. You have your whole family in one bedroom. So you might have a bed here and then a bed against the other wall. Or you might have a bed here and then a bed on the floor for the kids. And that is how you live. You go to sleep every night, you wake up every night, everybody's in the same room. Dinner time, Sometimes you stagger meals so that there's enough room at the table for everybody to sit, so that your family might eat at 5 o'clock and the other family who lives in the other bedroom might eat at 6 o'clock, or you might just all eat together. I've seen it happen both ways. Even with just this one family, I was there a few times where they were just all eating together, and there were other times where it was just one or two of them eating, and everyone else was off doing other activities, working, or whatever they were doing. Living and raising children in a double-up situation is hard because you're dealing with a lack of privacy. Like I said, your kids are right there all the time. I am not sure how we had my son because we were in a double-up situation where our daughter was in the room with us. So to be able to have any sort of time alone with my husband, I would have to find a babysitter. It's not, oh, put the child to sleep and then you have time to sit with your husband in the living room. You go out to the living room, there's other people there. You're also dealing with, especially for people who are living in basements, a lack of sunlight. The S family, they had 2 rooms, so they were actually really lucky because in their basement room, they were able to put a wall up. So they had 2 rooms. They had the living room area where they actually had their own couch and TV. They had one of those little dorm-sized refrigerators, and they had, in the corner of that room, the master bed, and that was where the parents slept. And then there was a wall, and on the other side of the wall, there was this tiny little room with 2 small windows. They were big enough that if there was a fire, the girls could get out. The parents wouldn't be able to. But at least they could get the girls out, is what their mom actually told me once. So inside this little room were a pair of bunk beds, and the girls actually had their own room. So they kind of lucked out because they had a semi-quasi apartment kind of style there. So they had some room. You also have this problem, the too many cooks in the kitchen. Oh my goodness. Each person who lives in that house feels they have the right to decide how you raise your children because you're living in their house. I lucked out on this because my mom is one of those people who does not like to sit at home. She was always out at Golden Agers, or she went to Evergreen Commons? She was always going off to someplace to go do something. So I didn't have a lot of cooks in the kitchen. I was able to actually raise my children the way I wanted to. The S family didn't have that. They were all homebodies. So I was there. We were there often, I guess, for parties, every birthday, every kind of anything that happened, or just to visit them. And we would go there, and I would be sitting in the living room, and if one of the girls did something wrong, the aunt would chime in, and the grandma would chime in, and then the grandpa would chime in. Everyone chimed in except the parents, who were completely overwhelmed and just steamrolled over. And so they didn't get a chance to be able to decide themselves the rules for their own kids, which was difficult for them. Alice hard fact, when you can't afford to pay your own way, everyone else has a say in how you live and how your children live. And that does make it hard for parents who are trained to raise children differently than they were raised. After being denied an apartment at traditional complex due to our low income, the next thing my husband and I did, we decided to apply at Section 8 complex. Well, this one had no problem with our income because it was going to be subsidized. It's Section 8. But so we had bad credit. Actually, I had bad credit. My husband had no credit. My husband spent most of our 20s, honestly, couch surfing or renting rooms from friends. The friend has an apartment and you say, hey, I have this extra bedroom and my rent's really high. Do you want to live in this bedroom? You can have this bedroom, $300, $400 a month. Well, let's split the cost. But the apartment was always in someone else's name. And he kind of hopped from apartment to apartment until we got married, pretty much. And then he started living with me. So he didn't have any credit whatsoever. Even though he'd been working, that doesn't count. You have to have that rental credit to be able to get any type of mortgage or even to be able to get an apartment. Section 8 of the Housing Act of 1937, it's often called Section 8, just plain old Section 8. When people are talking about where your apartment is, if you're living in a Section 8 apartment, you just say, oh, I live in Section 8. It authorizes the payment of rental housing assistance to private landlords on behalf of low-income households in the United States. In Holland, we have Meadow Lanes on South Washington, Greenbrier Apartments on Waverly, Harbor Village Apartments on 40th, which is near South Washington. I've actually heard it just called 40 West. Many people who are working low-wage jobs rely on Section 8 houses, such as Mary. I met Mary when I was working at a deli counter about 3-4 years ago. She and I worked a night shift together where we were staying around talking because there wasn't a lot of people coming to the deli counter at 8 o'clock at night. I'm not sure why. But so we were staying around talking. I'm just kind of leaning, all over everything because I wasn't the best deli worker, I have to tell you. That job didn't last long because apparently you're not supposed to lean all over the stuff that you use to cut the meat and hand it out to people. It just wasn't me. But we're sitting there talking one night, and she was telling me, she was looking at the schedule, and she said, oh, if she uses me for one more extra shift, I'm going to lose my place to live. Well, that really struck me as kind of strange because I thought, well, won't the extra money help you? So I asked her about it, and I said, well, how's that going to make it so you lose your place to live? And she said, well, I live in Section 8. So if I make too much money, if I go over the income limit too many times, I lose my Section 8 and I have to pay the full rent. And the full rent is a full $600 more than what she was currently paying. You're not going to make an extra $600 with one shift at the deli counter. You're only making $10, $12 an hour. So she won't be able to afford to make up that big extra chunk of rent. So she can't work overtime. She can't go over her income limit, and she can never get ahead. So she's stuck in this continuous cycle. And that's what I found too with us as well. We were stuck in this continuous cycle of being able to make it as long as we had assistance, if we had food assistance. For example, we could make it until my husband worked too much overtime, and then we lost the food assistance. But he didn't make enough money to be able to fill that gap. So then we weren't making it again. And then, of course, overtime doesn't last. So there were months where he had overtime, and then we would lose the food assistance. And the next month, he had no overtime. So then we're struggling to feed ourselves. And I'm reapplying again. But every time you apply, it takes probably about 2 or 3 weeks to get through the whole process. That's a lot of paperwork. And they want a lot of proof. And there's a big line. The DHS workers are really, really busy. They have hundreds and hundreds of cases, and they can't get to everybody the same day that they apply. There's just no way. So you end up in this continuous cycle, and we stayed in that cycle until my husband got enough raises to get us to the point where we could make it and have enough money to be able to feed ourselves and make the house payment just on his regular weekly income without him making that overtime. So it's hard to get out of that cycle because you get to the top and then you lose your assistance, you're bumped down again and again and again. Each time we got a little bit higher. So that's how you get to the end of it. So if you exceed the income limit too many times, Mary at full cost again. So she was afraid of losing her place because if she lost her place on Section 8, she has to go back to the wait list. It's not just I reapplied and again. No, you have to go back to the wait list. This is the Section 8 wait list. Meadow Lanes, they said they have no openings. It could be tomorrow, could be a year from now. It just depends on when the next person decides to move out. If you have a Section 8 apartment in Holland, you don't move out. You don't lose it because you don't know when you're going to be able to get another one. Greenbrier, there were 1 bedrooms, the wait list got so long they had to close it because she said realistically these people are never going to get called. 2 bedrooms, 6 to 8 months, and 3 bedrooms, or no, I'm sorry, the Greenbrier. 2 and 3 bedrooms are the same, 6 months to a year, but she said it could be longer. You really don't know. Harbor Village, 1 year for a 1 bedroom, 6 to 8 months wait for a 2 bedroom, and a full 1 year for a 3 bedroom. And you have to remember, these are people who can't afford to pay rent. So where are they living during that full year while they're waiting for an apartment to open up? They're couch surfing, they're staying in someone's basement, they're doubling and tripling up. They're doing whatever they can, even at the Mission. I toured the Mission, I would say almost 2 years ago now. And at the Mission, they have a program where they help people to get jobs, to better their education, to make their credit scores go up. You know, they work with these people step by step. And at the end of the program, you graduate and you leave the Mission, and most of them go to Section 8. And I asked them, well, what happens when you go, there's no apartments available at Section 8? And they said, well, they just keep staying here. The Mission will not kick them out. The Mission will let them stay, at least at the Women's Mission. They'll let them stay as long as they're following the rules, they graduate from the program, until a Section 8 apartment opens up for them. Section 8 program has a rental limit. Landlords are only allowed to charge tenants so much and not to go over it. So these are not the nicest places to live because, well, look at it this way. Say you want, and you go to the store, there's the $30 pair of shoes and there's the $500 pair of shoes. Which one's going to look nicer? The $500 pair. So same thing with an apartment. You have the Section 8 apartment that can only charge you so much, and you have the apartment that can charge you $1,400 a month. The Section 8 apartment is not going to be the same quality as the $1,400 a month apartment, but it is going to be a place to live, which is better than couch surfing or doubling up or being in someone's apartment. So that's our hard fact of Alice life for this one. The good quality stuff is not for you. This applies to housing, food, and sadly, often health care. Last year, during the first 3 weeks of the pandemic, I woke up one morning and my daughter showed me this thing on her mouth. It was this huge lumpy bump thing on the inside of her cheek that had just grown. I didn't know where it'd come from. You know, she's 12, almost 13. I'm not checking her mouth anymore. And I called her dentist. We go in, and we end up at an oral surgeon to have it removed. Oral surgeons don't take Medicaid, which is what my daughter has. So we had to pay out of pocket for it because oral surgeons charge too high and Medicaid only pays so much, so they won't take it. I've had this problem with dentists as well. It's hard to find a dentist who will take Medicaid because they can't charge as much. And so the one dentist I found, actually, I let them drill a cavity of mine, and it was like they took a bulldozer inside my mouth and just kind of rammed into my tooth. It ended up really jagged and not exactly what I wanted my tooth to look like at the end. Since then, my husband and I have decided to double up on our insurance. So even though we have Medicaid, we also get insurance through my husband's employer as well, just so we have more options. And so we can know that if something happens to the kids, we can get no matter what. For a 2-bedroom, you have a minimum of 2 people for a 2-bedroom. So if you don't have kids, you know, single people, you have to find a roommate who qualifies to get a 2-bedroom. But that roommate also has to qualify for Section 8. And then because you have 2 people, the income is higher, so your rent is going to be higher as well. There's a Section 8 voucher program. And again, this is not a picture of anybody. I know it's a picture I found on the clip art. The federal definition of homeless means a person does not have a place to stay. I know that you guys had someone in here last week who talked about homelessness quite a bit, right? So I'm just going to kind of touch on it. These people could be sleeping in warming centers, parking garages, abandoned buildings, homeless shelters, storage units, or other places not meant to live in for a human habitation. But just because someone is homeless does not mean they do not have a job. We've actually known people, my husband mostly. My husband's actually the one where a lot of my stories come from, so, which annoys him. We've known people who slept in heated storage units because the rent's cheaper on a storage unit than as an apartment. So what you do is you go to the storage unit, you rent out a heated one, and then you put your couch in there and your bed, and you can actually live there. And you get just one of those little portable toilet things like you use for camping. And you just have to be careful not to go outside or to not be there during the day when the people are there working. This works really well if you work for a shift, because then you just leave before they get there and then don't come back until it's closed at night. I've known people who sleep in cars, sometimes even parked at work. One person who tried to sneak into a semi-trailer at my husband's work and sleep in that at night. Section 8 voucher program, since the wait list is it's not a wait list for a place, it's a wait list to apply. So you're not even allowed to apply until you get called up on your wait list. People are pulled from the wait list whenever vouchers become available. It can happen as little as every 6 months or as long as every 2 years. The woman I talked to at Good Samaritan told me that they just pulled last month. So it could be another 2 years before more vouchers become available, and the rest of the people on the wait list will just have to wait. The person who was sneaking in the semi-trailer to sleep at night, he got fired because they didn't like that. The woman in the car at work, I would say it was last summer, maybe the summer before. Every day when I would drop my husband off at work, I would bring him lunch sometimes. And one day I was there, sitting outside, and I noticed a woman who was sitting in the car in the parking lot, just sitting there. And I asked my husband about it when he came into the car, and he said that the woman sat there every day, all day. And we were parked next to them, and I kind of looked over, and in the back of their car were a bunch of clothes and pillows and blankets. They were living in the back of their car. The woman sat there in the car all day because that was her house, and there was nowhere else for her to go. The man who was working, who owned this car, was working as a temp. He had just gotten the job, started through the temp agency, and it was probably their hope to be able to get him hired in and get a place to live so they could stop living in the car. And she really just had nowhere else to go. So she spent her days in the parking lot just waiting for him to come back. Every night they would drive away. When they got out of work, he would get in the car and they would drive away and probably go park somewhere else to sleep for the night. At one point, Al's life hard fact, people who try to sleep in their cars at work usually get fired. One day, one of the supervisors came in early for work and found the guy and this woman, I'm not sure if they were married or not, sleeping in the car in the parking lot because apparently they had nowhere else to go that night, and so he ended up losing that job too. Side note, at one point in our housing journey, my husband and I considered buying an RV to live in full-time year-round. And we actually joked that if we did that, we could drive it to his work every morning, and it would be a really short commute back home. Because, honey, I'm home kind of a thing. Obviously, we would have had to go to some sort of campground or something at night. Trailer parks. I know quite a few people who have lived or are living currently in trailer parks in the Holland area. Lot rents are currently vary. About $500 to $600 a month is normal, though. Many homeowners who live in trailer parks also have to pay a mortgage on top of that. So on top of that $500 to $600 a month lot rent, you also have to pay your house payment unless you were able to buy it outright or if you've already paid it off. That's usually about $200 to $300 a month for a trailer. You also pay utilities, water, electric, heat, internet, and phones. Unfortunately, there's still a minimum credit rating to be able to get into a trailer park. You can't just go there with bad credit because then you might not pay the lot rent every month. We almost applied to live in a trailer park, but the day that we were supposed to meet the park manager, he didn't show up. And so we were left standing there outside with our kids kind of throwing rocks at each other and stuff. And that's when we decided we're going to get some help. At this point, I'm still living with my husband and child with relatives. So this temporary situation has gone on for about 3 years. It's time to seek help, so I turned to Habitat for Humanity. We don't meet the qualifications again because bad credit, so we're denied. Habitat for Humanity, I actually spent a lot of time on the phone with these people. They are really great. Habitat for Humanity's program has a minimum credit score of 620. A lot of it, which is the price of the house, is the cost of materials, according to Raul Garcia, who is the Habitat's home services coach. Community Action House and Habitat are actually partnering together. This program hasn't become official yet. They just told me about it, I think yesterday, the day before, when I was talking to Habitat. They are going to start having people who come through the Community Action House's housing program go straight to Habitat. And they're going to funnel them straight to Habitat to get mortgages through Habitat to be able to help them, because people are getting through the Community Action House's housing program and they can't afford a house because the housing prices are too high in Holland. The monthly payment for a $180,000 Habitat house is $800, and $180,000 is the normal now for a Habitat house. To be able to afford this, a family must have a yearly income of $32,000, and that's one person making $16 an hour. My husband and I just last year got to the point where we're making just a little less than $35,000. So we are just now able to afford to live in Holland in a Habitat house. Habitat serves a population making between $32,000 and $55,000 a year. And then they have some stuff off their website too. It's a partnership, home building and repair Christian ministry serving Ottawa and parts of Allegan County. It's based on the principle that all God's people deserve a decent place to live, and our community is a better place when that occurs. Habitat for Humanity has always been a strong proponent of a hand up rather than a handout. These are not free houses. The people still have to pay the mortgage. It's just an interest-free mortgage. And they build in a way that makes it so that they can afford to sell at a price that people can pay. I'm going to call this woman G's mom, because this is a friend of mine who I went to school with, and her mother ended up in a Habitat house. My friend was all of her kids were grown. She was a single woman. She had just gone through a very messy divorce and had been left with nothing. She was couch surfing, staying with her children mostly, either on the couch, or there were a couple times where she would be able to stay in one of the kids' bedrooms for a few nights to a couple of weeks. And then the kids would sleep out on the couch. And she was just kind of in this in-between zone where she didn't have a place to live. She went to Habitat and she was able to get a house. She stayed there for 10 years and then sold it at a profit of $100,000 about 2 years ago and moved out of state. But it really turned out well for her, and Habitat really helped her out. There's also Jubilee Ministries. I don't know anyone who's ever gone to Jubilee Ministries because they are a higher income level, and most of those people I don't talk to. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's they don't talk to me. I'm not sure. But Jubilee Ministries serves a population making between 80 and 120% of median income for this area. For a family of four, on the bottom it says this would mean an income of $69,680 to $104,520. So these people are not poor people. They're making $60,000 to $100,000 a year. These families can afford a home value of up to $250,000, but the housing cost in Ottawa County is higher than that. So someone making $100,000 a year cannot afford to live in Holland anymore, unless you already owned your home before. They're currently working on a joint project with Habitat for Humanity, but their next 10 homes are actually going to be modular homes, they told me. They're trying to make a more efficient way to be able to build houses, and they found that modular homes are cheaper to build. So they're going to buy modulars and put them on these lots and charge people, quite a bit of money to be able to buy one. It is a major problem. Jubilee and Habitat are working together. I think they said that they are working on a project on 40th Street where there are going to be 48 homes there. Part of them are going to be Habitat homes and part will be Jubilee homes. So you'll have people making anywhere from about $35,000 a year to $100,000 a year, all living in the same neighborhood.
But they will be on property they own versus the trailer.
Yeah, it won't be a trailer park. It'll be like property that they own, which is kind of like what I have now. I have a modular home, but it's on property that we own. It's just out in Cheshire Township.
Problem during COVID has been a major problem for people that own modular homes but have to pay money to the landlord for the property it's on.
Exactly.
They would get kicked out of their place because they couldn't afford to pay that monthly fee. They'd lose what they already had invested if
Yeah.
they even owned it.
Yes, because if you bought your house outright, you paid all that money to begin with, you own it, you could always move it because the trailers are movable, but it costs thousands of dollars to move it.
It's ridiculous to think about.
Yeah, it really is because it costs thousands of dollars to move these trailers, and if you couldn't pay the $400, $500 a month lot rent, yeah, you're not going to have that money to move your trailer either. Jubilee told me that they pick up where Habitat leaves off. The 70 to 80% of medium income group is really underserved because Jubilee doesn't officially serve them, and neither does Habitat. But Jubilee said that they don't turn those people away if they do come. They work with them, they find out what they can do. On the left, I have something off of their website. There is an attainable housing shortage facing Holland, and Jubilee's mission is to provide quality, attainable housing solutions. This mission is accomplished by renovations, small houses, and new developments. By aligning with other organizations and key community leaders, Jubilee is able to provide housing supply to the greater Holland community. So they really, fantastic people. Oops, I think I skipped one. So why do poor people have bad credit? All through this story I'm telling you about myself, my husband and I keep on getting denied housing because we have bad credit and no credit. So why did I have bad credit? Well, some reasons that we have bad credit: medical bills. Like I told you the story about my daughter with oral surgeons don't take Medicaid. And that's when you have Medicaid. You might lose your Medicaid if you forget to send in paperwork, if you work too much overtime, and you have gotten yourself out of that income bracket. When my daughter had that removed, I actually put it on a credit card called Care Credit because we didn't have the cash for it. I didn't have, whatever, thousands of dollars that this man wanted to be able to take this thing out of my daughter's mouth to send it in for a biopsy. And when they say something needs to be biopsied, well, you don't want to sit on it till you end up with $1,000 or $2,000 that they're going to charge you to take it out. This thing needs to come out now. We need to find out, does she need more treatment? Because this is my daughter. So while I'm standing at the counter of the oral surgeon, and they have this cute little pamphlet right here that says Care Credit, and well, there's a way to pay. And I knew when I picked up that little application that I wasn't going to be able to pay that. I already knew this is a payment I cannot afford. But I picked it up anyway, and I filled it in, and I sent it in. That is actually now something that's bombing my credit every month when I'm unable to pay the bill. But it was either that or leave this tumor-like thing that needs a biopsy sitting in my 12-year-old's mouth. And I couldn't do that. So I threw my credit under the bus. Biopsy turned out fine, which was great. But I still had to do it. I still had to know. So it's hard to afford food and utilities after you pay the rent. Many people are having trouble with utilities, especially because you need food every day. And so people pay the house payment. Then you buy your food, and then the electric bill comes. And you can't pay it. So again, every time you don't pay your utilities, that's another hit on your credit. You put it on the credit card because you couldn't afford it, but you needed it. Utilities, food, medical procedures, and gas are all things that I've paid for with credit cards because I couldn't afford to pay for it. The problem is when the bill comes, I still couldn't afford to pay for it. So then I couldn't pay the bill. Paying the car insurance isn't a physical necessity. So the months when things are tight, only the physical necessities get paid. So there was actually about 6 months last year, I drove around with no car insurance because we could not pay for car insurance. And it wasn't a physical necessity. Physical necessities are food, water, because our water is not drinkable for us, heat during the winter, and gas to get back and forth to work so you can go ahead and buy more food, water, and heat. Things get tight if you catch the flu and you didn't work for 2 days in a row. When every penny counts, when you're sitting there going down to zero in your bank account every single Thursday night, waiting for that paycheck to hit on Friday so you can go out and buy toilet paper, you don't have backup money. So if my husband got sick for a few days and couldn't go to work, we would end up with a very rough week the next week when that paycheck came and it was short. Things are tight if your job sends you home early for lack of work. When you had to leave work early so your wife could get that lump checked out. Or when someone's job isn't year-round. My current job isn't year-round. So during the summers, we really struggle. During the fall, winter, and spring, my income actually makes our house payment. So those 2 months during the summer are really, really hard. One payment or another is always late because the bills are taking turns getting paid. Well, I paid the electric bill last month, so it doesn't have a shut-off notice this month. And next month, I have to fill the propane tank. So I'm going to have to save up money for the propane tank because they want cash. So the bills take turns being juggled around and getting paid, and if you don't have a shut-off notice, it can wait till next month so that you can pay something else that does have a shut-off notice, or to make sure that you're not going to freeze to death overnight. So if we kept getting denied, why didn't we fix our credit? Well, we did, obviously, because now we own a house out in Allegan. But fixing your credit is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Step one was paying off all of my old debts that were not paid before. Step two, I had to wait for those to either fall off the credit report or to not matter anymore. That actually took a couple of years because they keep those on your credit report for 7 years. And I actually had one that went to court before I was able to pay it. Banks don't like to loan money to people that had to go to court before they paid their bills. So that was actually a pretty long wait. Step three was build my credit back up. So I was able to, after everything fell off, I was able to start getting small loans at the bank, at our credit union, and to be able to build my credit back up to the point where I could get a car loan. When I got a car loan, I put my husband's name on the car loan as well, because he had the income and I had the credit, which established his credit. See, I was lucky. My parents actually, when I turned 18, 19, helped me to establish credit. They co-signed on a car loan for me. They helped me to get some credit started because my parents knew I would need it someday. My husband's family didn't do that. His family was a working class family, and the way that my mother-in-law always put it was, once they turn 18, you don't have to help them anymore, they're on their own. Many of you know that that's not the best way to send a young adult out into the world, because you're sending them out with no credit, with no job, with no higher education. College is not for people who are working class. The way that their family is, the way that they talk to the children from the very young age as if they are not going to go to college. Oh, just wait until you're working. You'll understand why you get tired every day. Oh, just wait. I'm going to try and get you into the factory where I work. They do not say things like, oh, maybe you'll go to Michigan State. Maybe you'll be a doctor. Maybe you'll be a lawyer. Those are not things that are said to the kids. So from a very young age, they're raised knowing that they're going to end up going into factory work. You go to school, education isn't really valued as much as what it was in my family. One thing that was told to me once was, well, wait until they get to school, then you don't have to pay for daycare anymore. You won't have to pay for a babysitter. And that's the value of education. You send your kids to school not for education, but so you don't have to pay for a babysitter. And then they get through to 12th grade, get out, and go find factory work. So it's really a different kind of raising. Working class families have different expectations of the kids than what an upper class family does. An upper class family expects their kids to go to college. They expect that the kids who go to college will need help. You send them money, you help pay for their dorm room or for their apartment or wherever they're living. You buy their books for them so they can go to classes. You put gas in their car. You provide them with a car. And these things are not things that working class families can even do, even if they wanted to, which many of them probably would like to see kids go to college, but it's just not in their capacity to make it happen. So for working class kids to go to college, they're more on their own, and they really have to rely heavily on student loans. So at the end of all of this, after I established my husband's credit, step 5, we didn't have platinum credit. It was kind of shiny, it was kind of nice. So off we go. It took 7 years for us to fix our credit. And by that point, we had 2 kids. We were also lucky we had a caring family. Most people who are working class, they don't make the money to pay off extra debts. When you're just barely making it week after week after week, you can't say, oh, well, there's this old medical bill that I would like to pay off. Or I had that apartment at such and such, and I ended up having to leave it, and I still owe them money. You can't pay that off when every week you're going down to 0 and waiting until the next payday to buy toilet paper. So we really lucked out that we were paying a ridiculously low amount for rent and that we were living with family. So because you never are able to fix your credit, many people end up in this endless cycle of couch surfing and staying with somebody else, with relatives or staying in someone else's house. Because you can't even, like I said, you can't even get an apartment at Section 8 without good credit. And that's where programs like Community Action House and the Habitat for Humanity and even the Holland Rescue Mission really come in handy because people can stay there and they help them fix their credit. Holland housing prices. These were all things that I found this past couple of days. Central Holland area, there is a house for $194,900 with 3 bedrooms. North side of Holland, there's one for $229,900, and that's also got 3 bedrooms. And I found 2 2-bedrooms in the Central Holland area. One was only $149,000. It's really small and kind of dinky. And probably 10 years ago, it would have gone for maybe about $80,000. And it is now $149,000. That is the cheapest one I found in the Holland area. 2 bedrooms can work if you have only 1 child or if you have like 2 boys or 2 girls. But if you have a boy and a girl, you're going to run into problems because they technically can't share a room. We were house hunting in 2017 and 2018, so we weren't dealing with prices that are this bad. We weren't dealing with prices this high. We were dealing in a competitive market. It was still a seller's market, but it wasn't as bad as it is now. So we had an FHA mortgage with less than a $90,000 limit. So off into the house hunting we go. Oh, there are some houses I actually looked at during my 2 years of house hunting. And some memorable things that my realtor actually said to me. That one on the left, you could actually, when we went there, it was the strangest kind of place. You could actually see where it was still on the trailer that they drove it in on. It was a mobile home. It was still like, it had wheels under it and everything. And even the little thing that hitched up to the semi-trailer. And the realtor actually said, you could just hitch this up and drive it right away. And you could, because you could actually see right where everything was, and you looked underneath and you could see the wheels. That one we didn't get. The bank wouldn't finance it because someone could drive it away. On the right-hand side, that one was actually nice. That was in Allegan. But the outlets were really, really old. They only had 2 plugs in them still. They didn't have that 3rd plug. And so that one was at the very top of our price range. And we couldn't get that one because the mortgage company would make us redo all the electric, and we didn't have that kind of money. The one with the red roof, that one was so pretty. It even had a pool in the back. When we first went there, my husband and I were just loving it. We saw the front of the house, and we walked around the back, and we were amazed this was in our price range. It was so beautiful. And there's a swimming pool, and it's on like 4 acres. And then we went around to the back and looked in the slider, and there's the living room, but there's no floor for the living room. The living room floor was actually in the basement. It had collapsed down into it. But it was still a really nice house. And one of the best ones we looked at, but it really wasn't for us because we needed something we could live in and walk around in. So couldn't do that one. And then on the right-hand side, that bottom one, the property is gorgeous. The house floor is just wavy and moves when you walk on it. That was actually another modular. It was on 28 acres. I fell in love with that 28 acres. That's the house that got away from me. We couldn't get it financed because as you walked, the house actually moved, and every time you took a step, the whole floor would kind of wave as you're walking around. So, and the problem with the modulars is that the walls are built on top of the floor. So to be able to redo the floor, we'd have to take off all the walls, which then you're kind of stuck with no house again. And then the one we heard the most often, we have to cancel today's showing because the house just sold. Again and again and again, houses were sold either before we could look at them or before we could bid on them. When we were looking, houses would sell within 2 days. If you weren't there the day a house went on to market, you probably didn't have a chance to bid on it. Trying to stay within 30 miles of work. This was a real hard point for us to let go because we couldn't afford the gas driving back and forth, and we knew that was going to be rough if we did. House after house, property after property went to higher bidders within 30 miles of Holland. When we first started, we tried to do any house within 30 miles. And every time I looked at the realtor's website, Holland would be this little dot, and there would be a circle all around like this that was just empty. Blue dots of other houses that we could afford were all over outside of that circle. But Holland was really the epicenter of this circle where nothing was affordable. And it's still like that today. What we could afford, often bank wouldn't finance, the living room floors in the basement, the house waves when you walk on it, things like that. So we house on for nearly 2 years, year-round, before we finally decided to give up trying to stay within 30 miles of Holland. The house we bought is 40.5 miles from Holland. And my husband's been going back and forth to work every workday. So at the end, we bought home 40 miles from Holland. My husband has commuted back and forth. The big thing is, though, we finally have a home. We finally have a front door that is our own. Somewhere where our kids have their own rooms and are not in ours. Somewhere where we have control over our own schedules. And somewhere where we don't have to do what other people tell us to do anymore. Because when you're living in someone else's house, they have a say over what you do and how you live. So the affordable housing versus quality housing debate, I always say, it doesn't always have to be the best house. Sometimes it just has to be a house. It has to be a place where you can put your stuff and say, this is mine. This area is somewhere where I can be, and no one can kick me out of it. So ways to help. This is actually a handout by the door, but I've also found a few other things that I was not able to find before I sent her the handout. Start a church micro pantry. Third Reformed Church is where I go. That's my home church, my family church. I'm part of the outreach committee there, and they're starting to start a micro pantry. This actually came from an idea from Harvest Stand Ministries in Zealand. And they sent somebody from the outreach program plans and everything on how to build these micro pantries. Unfortunately, when I looked at the plans, because she sent it out to everybody on the outreach program, and I have them, but it actually said that I was not allowed to share them. There was actually a little thing on the bottom that said I was not allowed to share these plans. A micro pantry is, have you ever seen those places on the side of the road, a little mini library? You just open the doors and take whatever books you want. It's like that, but with dry good foods, toilet paper, necessities, anything that people who are hungry might need, because they might not be able to go and get help. They might be at work all day. They might be embarrassed to go and apply for help. So if they find that there's nothing for dinner that night, they can go to a micro pantry, open it up, even if it's 7, 8 o'clock at night, and take something. They can get some food. And so Third Reformed Church is actually going to be trying to start a micro pantry if they're given permission by the Holland Historic District, because we are kind of stuck in the Holland Historic District area. Tiny home communities. Kalamazoo's actually got this Hope Project, and what they're going to do is they have tiny home communities, and they have people who are going to live in these tiny homes and get help for underlying issues that they already have that have caused homelessness in their lives, such as substance abuse, alcoholism, lack of education. And they work with these people who live in these tiny homes, and it's a program that they go through for a few years until they're able to find a different place to live. And hopefully at that point, whatever caused them to go into homelessness in the past has been solved, whatever issue that they had. Tiny houses there's actually a tiny house community in Detroit for low-income people. And these houses, they buy a city lot and put 3 or 4 houses on the one lot. And tiny home communities are actually a lot more affordable and cheaper for people to be able to live in. I don't know if the city of Holland probably wouldn't be able to allow it, but that's actually something that would help people, and it would be especially for those people who, for FHA, or for the Section 8, those one-bedroom people, the people who are on the wait list that are year-long or have been completely closed because the wait list got so long these people will never be called. People who are single or just a couple, a tiny house is perfect. I don't know if I would put 3 or 4 kids in there, but if it's just you and maybe one other adult, a tiny house would be fantastic. You can also volunteer or contribute. Community Action House, Lakeshore Habitat for Humanity, they actually said that they take groups. If anybody wants to come as a church group, they take groups and they have 4-hour shifts. So you work from 8 a.m. to noon, and there's another shift that works from 1 to 5. And during the summer, there's actually another shift that works from like 6 to 8 at night. Salvation Army, Love Inc., it serves Allegan, Pullman, and Hamilton areas. The woman at Good Samaritan actually told me that they used to be Love Inc., but they are not anymore. And then Jubilee Ministries, again, since they're going to a more efficient way to make houses, they're not taking volunteers anymore, but they do take donations. I believe that's the end. Any questions? Yes?
The tiny house thing on the corner of Central and 16th.
I know what you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, is that what you're talking about? Take one lot,
Something
put 4
like
houses
that.
on it?
Yep, I believe that is like a tiny house community. They do have small, I think those were stick-built though.
Yeah.
Tiny houses, you can buy them modular, and it's more efficient, which is why Jubilee Ministries is going to that. And you can just wheel them in, hopefully take the wheels off, and park them. And then people can just start living in them. But yeah, it's something like that.
Other questions?
You talk about factory workers. Not all factory workers are low paid.
No.
I retired 20 years ago, and the lowest paid guy in the factory was the janitor at $20 an hour. You have to look at what industry you work in.
Right. See, it depends on where you work and how skilled you are. Also, do you have a union? Unions will actually help out a lot. A lot of the people who work in union factories will make more because the people are all working together to make sure that everyone is well paid. And it would be fantastic if everyone at factories made $20 an hour, but that's not the case. Many of our factories in Holland are hiring around $14, $15 an hour.
And one of the things to also keep in mind, the United Way statistics indicate that we're talking about at least 35% of Allegan and Ottawa County's residents, aren't we, when we're
Yes.
talking about the working but not wealthy enough to afford, right?
Yes.
Dallas folks.
We're talking about the unskilled labor, people who have not gone to special training. Because a lot of people in factory workers, like if you're a welder, you make a lot more money than someone who's working assembly. Any other questions?
This isn't really a question, just an observation. It seems to me that the stress that would be building up when you go through this process of doors closing, unable to get over some of these barriers, we haven't even really discussed the whole mental health issue that might play into all of that.
I saw that you guys are having a mental health issue person come next week, correct? Yes. Well, I can't speak for everybody because I didn't do a lot of research on it. But for me, I ended up with both depression and anxiety. And I'm still undergoing treatment for that now. So it's not something that just goes away. And yes, the stress does build up. There was one time we were somewhere, I forget where, and we had gone, I believe it might have been at Goodwill. And we went there for help with finances. And I actually broke down right in front of the guy who was there helping us. And I told him, I don't think I can do this anymore. We need help. Isn't there anywhere that can help us? I cannot continue to survive like this. And we went back out into the car, and my husband said, you know, you could at least keep it together in front of people who are strangers. And at that point, I couldn't. I really could not keep it together anymore. Because everywhere we went, every time we tried, it was no, your credit's not good enough. No, your income's not good enough. No, for some other reason, you keep on getting denied housing. But in the end, we did finally get housing. We ended up going to a mortgage broker. You know, it was okay, but he got us a house.
Isn't transportation also an issue? Like if you have to move outside of Holland and you have only one car and two of you have jobs, how do you handle that?
I stay at home and look out the windows like this. Wish I could go out and do things again. My husband takes the car to work. We put $100 in the tank and gas every week. It's a lot of gas. If I'm coming to Holland, we have to pile everybody into the car at 5:30 in the morning because there's one trip to Holland a day. And if you miss the bus to Holland, you're not going. Bus goes out at 5:30 because my husband has to go to work. So the kids sleep in the car on the way. Transportation with one car is a huge issue. And yes, when you're lower income, you have only one car because you can't afford two. There's no way my husband and I could afford to keep two cars on the road. Not legally, anyway. About 2 weeks ago yesterday, I got a phone call from my husband at work about 10 minutes before his break, and I picked up the phone and I thought, well, that's strange, you know, he shouldn't be on 10 minutes. And his first words to me were, I'm heading into the emergency room. He'd had an accident at work. There was an issue. And I am stuck 40 miles away. My husband's heading into the emergency room after being injured at work, and I have no way to get to him. I have no way to get to our car. And he has no way to get back to me because he's on his way in an ambulance. The first thing I did was call my sister. And bless her heart, she dropped everything. I mean, everything. Everything she was doing, all her plans for that day immediately were canceled. She scooped up her boys, she stuck them in the back of her car, and she raced to me. She lives in Finnville, and I live in Cheshire Township in Allegan. It took her half an hour to get to me. She picked me up, me and my kids. She drove me to Holland Hospital. I got the keys from my husband. Then she drove me back to my husband's place of work where I could get the car. And then she took my kids for the rest of the day while I went and sat in an emergency room. So I guess we rely on family. We rely on friends. We rely on our neighbors.
It's 10:30, folks, and if you have additional questions, I'm sure Kristen will be happy to answer some for a couple of minutes afterwards. But on the other hand, if you have to go, that's fine too. I would like to take a moment to say I think it's valuable for us not to just get statistics on poverty in our local area or housing issues in our local area. It's also very valuable to hear from people who've experienced some of this. So please, let's thank Kristen for speaking to us today.
Thank you.